There is something deeply unsettling about a man who walks into a room full of armed enemies with nothing visible in his hands. No rifle, no knife, no visible protection. And yet he carries himself with the calm certainty of someone who already knows how the situation will end. The air tightens as he enters. Conversations slow. Eyes shift. Hands move closer to hidden weapons. And still he doesn't hesitate. He doesn't rush. He doesn't panic. He simply observes, as if every movement around him has already been calculated long before anyone else realized there was something to calculate. That man is James Bond. For decades, audiences have been trained to look at the obvious. The gun in his hand, the explosion behind him, the car speeding through chaos. But the most dangerous object he ever carried was never any of those things. It was smaller, quieter, almost invisible. A watch resting beneath the cuff of his sleeve, ignored by enemies and dismissed by everyone who failed to understand what it truly represented. Because in Bond's world, the most lethal weapon is not the one that makes noise. It's the one no one notices until it's too late. A weapon can be taken. A knife can be detected. Even the most advanced technology can raise suspicion under the wrong circumstances. But a luxury watch worn by a well-dressed British agent passes through every layer of security without question. It belongs. It blends in. It disappears into the image of refinement and wealth that Bond projects so effortlessly. And that invisibility is not an accident. It is strategy. When James Bond appeared in Doctor No, the watch on his wrist was not flashy or exaggerated. It was a Rolex Submariner, a real tool built for real conditions. Water resistance, durability, precision timing. It was designed for professionals who operated in environments where failure was not an option. And that is exactly why it fit Bond, because he wasn't just a spy. He was a man who lived in constant pressure, where every second mattered and every decision had consequences. Bond never looked at his watch to check the hour. He looked at it to control time itself. Every glance was calculated, every second measured. He wasn't reacting to events. He was anticipating them, timing movements, waiting for the exact moment to act. In his world, seconds were not just units of time. They were opportunities, and sometimes they were the difference between life and death. This is what made the watch powerful long before it became a gadget. It represented control, discipline, precision, the idea that Bond was always one step ahead, always aware, always calculating. Even when nothing was happening on screen, the presence of that watch suggested that something was always in motion beneath the surface, a plan forming, a move waiting to be executed. That quiet realism didn't last forever. As the films evolved, so did the expectations of the audience. And eventually, something changed. The watch stopped being just a tool. It became something else entirely. That shift begins with Goldfinger. Here, the idea of hidden functionality started to take shape. The watch was no longer just measuring time. It was interacting with the world. Subtle at first, but enough to plant a new idea in the mind of the audience. What if something so small could do something so dangerous? What if the most harmless object in the room was actually the most powerful one? That question changed everything. A gun creates tension because you expect it to be used. A watch creates tension because you don't. And that unpredictability is what made Bond's watches so effective. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't demand attention. They simply existed quietly until the exact moment they were needed. And when that moment came, they changed everything. The watch became a hidden advantage, a silent solution, a way out of impossible situations. Whether it was a magnetic field pulling objects across a room or a concealed mechanism triggering an escape, the watch allowed Bond to act in ways no one else could anticipate. It turned surprise into a weapon. By the time Bond reached Live and Let Die, Subtlety had evolved into spectacle. Watches were no longer just clever tools. They were packed with impossible technology. Magnets strong enough to manipulate metal. Devices hidden within polished steel. Functions that blurred the line between science and fantasy. And yet they worked. Because they were still grounded in one key idea: invisibility. No matter how powerful the gadget became, it remained hidden in plain sight. That was the illusion. That was the magic. The audience knew something was there, but the characters in the film did not. And that gap between knowledge created tension that kept viewers engaged. When GoldenEye introduced a new era of Bond, everything changed again. The Rolex was replaced by Omega. The style became sharper, more modern, more precise. And the watches followed that same evolution. The Omega Seamaster wasn't just an accessory. It was a statement. Clean design. Advanced technology. A reflection of a world that was becoming more digital, more complex, more dangerous. And inside that watch were tools that pushed the concept even further. Lasers, detonators, remote systems. The watch had become a complete tactical device. But there was a problem. The more powerful the gadgets became, the less believable they felt. Exploding watches, impossible devices, exaggerated technology. They were entertaining, but they drifted away from the grounded realism that made Bond feel dangerous in the first place. And when everything becomes possible, nothing feels real. The tension begins to fade, because danger only works when it feels believable. That's why the era of James Bond changed everything. Starting with Casino Royale, the gadgets were stripped down. The watches became simpler. No lasers, no absurd features. Just precision engineering and durability. And somehow, they became more dangerous than ever. Because now, the watch wasn't the weapon. Bond was. The watch returned to its original purpose: timing, control, discipline. It no longer needed to do everything. It just needed to support a man who already could. Across decades of films, from Dr. No to No Time to Die, the watches of James Bond told a story of evolution. From simple tools to complex gadgets, and back to refined instruments of control. But the truth never changed. The watch was never deadly because of what it could do. It was deadly because of who was wearing it. Because in the hands of the wrong person, it is just a watch. But in the hands of James Bond, it becomes something else entirely. A weapon hidden in time itself.